wonderful day. I hope everybody had a great day yesterday. Yesterday was July 4th, also known as Independence Day here in America, if you're not from America. But I'm so happy you could be here. Good morning. I hope everyone had a really safe time. I hope everyone had a lot of fun. The 4th of July is usually a time for picnics and barbecues and stuff like that. So I genuinely hope everyone had a great and safe and fun time. Yay! I also had a great time. I was with my D&D group, my friends, and I ate a lot, I drank a lot, I had a lot of fun. I'm absolutely exhausted. I ended up drinking a little too much and ended up crashing at one of my D&D friends' house who lived nearby, which was thankful because I was exhausted. I fell asleep. I ended up falling asleep in a chair. So I ended up getting some rest, came home this morning, and here I am. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. I'm so happy. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. I really do. I'm a little I'm a little coughy today. Allergies have been acting up. It's very humid, and it's a beautiful day, but it's just a bit humid and a bit allergy-ish. And I'm dying just a little bit. Demon King Sangwoo, hi! Welcome to my stream. I'm happy you could be here. I hope you're doing well today. Thank you for being here. I'm a little tired, but we're gonna be reading today. I hope you enjoy the reading stream. Thank you for being here. So nice to see you. I'm just talking a little bit about my day. Yesterday was Independence Day here in America, and I had fun. I had a great time. We had a big barbecue with some friends, and I had a little too much to drink, so I'm a little hungover, a little bit, just a little bit. But I'm drinking plenty of water. So that way, I know it's you, Lucian. Thank you for being here. Lucian. You're the bestest. Thank you. But I'm just a little tired. But we're gonna be reading today. I've been reading Frankenstein by Mary Shelley these last few weeks. We're halfway through the book, and it's starting to get really good. And I would love to be able to read more of it. Maybe I don't think we'll be able to finish it today, because looking at the book, we're only halfway through it, and I don't think I have the mental capacity or the stamina today to read all of it. So we'll read a few chapters. I'm not the best at words. I have a bit of a speech impediment, so I struggle with some words. But I hope you enjoy it. I really hope you enjoy it. I'm so happy you're here. But yeah, last time, okay, recap time. Last time we left off, Frankenstein had been traveling on his own for a little while, just to kind of reflect on everything that has happened, his brother passing away, another one of his friends dying as a consequence of his brother's passing, the fact that he created life and now he can't take responsibility for it like a deadbeat dad. So yeah, so now we're at the point where the monster has finally made contact with his creator, and is asking to, the monster is asking Frankenstein to listen to his story, and then, make judgments from there, and all that stuff. I'm so happy that we can continue this. We're on chapter 11 right now. We've gone through a lot. I don't know how many chapters this book is. I haven't read the story in a very long time, so I don't remember exactly how many chapters it is. I'm actually gonna look through it real quick. I'm looking at... Oh, there's 24 chapters. There's 24 chapters. Okay, so we're about halfway. We're about halfway through. Just a little bit more than halfway. Oh, I dropped something. Oops. It'll be fine. It'll stay there. Okay. Getting myself together. Let's see. Got my glasses back on. Let's go. And here we go. We're gonna continue from where we last left off. I hope you enjoy. Let's see. Chapter 11. It is with considerable difficulty that I remember the original era of my being. All the events of that period appear confused and indistinct. A strange multiplicity of sensations seized me, and I saw, felt, heard, and smelt at the same time. And it was, indeed, a long time before I learned to distinguish between the operations of my various senses. By degrees, I remember, a stronger light pressed upon my nerves, so that I was obliged to shut my eyes. Darkness then overcame me and troubled me, but hardly had I felt this, when, by opening my eyes, as I now suppose, the light poured in upon me again. I walked and, I believe, descended, but I presently found a great altercation in my sensations. Before, dark and opaque bodies had surrounded me, impervious to my touch or sight, but I now found that I could wander on at liberty, with no obstacles which I could not either surmount or avoid. The light became more and more oppressive to me, and, the heat wearying me as I walked, I sought a place where I could receive shade. This was the forest near Ingolstadt, and here I lay by the side of a brook resting from my fatigue, until I felt tormented by hunger and thirst. This roused me from my nearly dormant state, and I ate some berries which I found hanging on the trees, or lying in the ground. I slaked my thirst at the brook, then lying down, was overcome by sleep. It was dark when I awoke. I felt cold also, and half frightened, as it were instinctively, finding myself so desolate. Before I had quitted your apartment, on a sensation of cold, I had covered myself with some clothes, but these were insufficient to secure me from the dews of night. I was a poor, helpless, miserable wretch. I knew, and could distinguish, nothing, but feeling pain invaded me on all sides, and I sat down and wept. Soon a gentle light stole over the heavens and gave me a sensation of pleasure. I started up and beheld a radiant form rise from among the trees. I gazed with a kind of wonder. It moved slowly, but it enlightened my path, and I again went out in search of berries. I was still cold, when under one of the trees I found a huge cloak, with which I covered myself. I sat down upon the ground. No distinct ideas occupied my mind. All was confused. I felt light, and hunger, and thirst, and darkness. Innumerable sounds rung in my ears, and on all sides various scents saluted me. The only object that I could distinguish was the bright moon, and I fixed my eyes on that with pleasure. Several changes of day and night passed, and the orb of night had greatly lessened, when I began to distinguish my sensations from each other. Gradually I saw plainly the clear stream that supplied me with drink, and the trees that shaded me with their foliage. I was delighted when I first discovered that a pleasant sound, which often saluted my ears, proceeded from the throats of the little winged animals who had often intercepted the light from my eyes. I also began to observe, with greater accuracy, the forms that surrounded me, and to perceive the boundaries of radiant roof of light which canopied me. Sometimes I tried to imitate the pleasant songs of the birds, but I was unable. Sometimes I wished to express my sensations in my own mode, but the uncouth and inarticulate sounds which broke from me frightened me to silence again. The moon had disappeared from the night, and again with a lessened form showed itself, while I still remained in the forest. My sensations had, by this time, become distinct, and my mind received every day additional ideas. My eyes became accustomed to the light, and to perceive objects in their right forms. I distinguished the insect from the herb, and by degrees, one herb from another. I found that the sparrow uttered none but harsh notes, whilst those of the blackbird and thrush were sweet and enticing. One day, when I was oppressed by cold, I found a fire which had been left by some wandering beggars, and was overcome with delight at the warmth I experienced from it. In my joy, I thrust my hand into the live embers, but quickly drew it out again with a cry of pain. How strange, I thought, that the same cause should produce such opposite effects. I examined the materials of the fire, and to my joy found it to be composed of wood. I quickly collected some branches, but they were wet and would not burn. I was pained at this, and sat still, watching the operation of the fire. The wet wood which I had placed near the heat dried, and itself became inflamed. I reflected on this, and, by touching the various branches, I discovered the cause, and busied myself in collecting a great quantity of wood, that I might dry it, and have a plentiful supply of fire. When night came on, and brought sleep with it, I was in the greatest fear lest my fire should be extinguished. I covered it carefully with dry wood and leaves, and placed wet branches upon it. Then, spreading my cloak, I lay on the ground and sunk into sleep. It was morning when I awoke, and my first care was to visit the fire. I uncovered it, and a gentle breeze quickly fanned it to flame. I observed this also, and contrived a fan of branches, which roused the embers when they were nearly extinguished. When night came again, I found with pleasure that the fire gave light as well as heat, and that the discovery of this element was useful to me in my food, for I found some of the offals that the travelers had left had been roasted, and tasted much more savory than the berries I had gathered from the trees. I tried, therefore, to dress my food in the same manner, placing it on the live embers. I found that the berries were spoiled by this operation, and the nuts and roots much improved. Food, however, became scarce, and I often spent the whole day searching in vain for a few acorns to assuage the pain of hunger. When I found this, I resolved to quit the place that I had hitherto inhabited, to seek for what... Oh! I almost forgot! If you guys hear construction, if anyone hears construction happening in my background, just know that, one of the anomalies in my basement had destroyed a couple of rooms, so, over the weekend, so Creator Creator and his team are fixing up some rooms, so if you hear, like, banging or whirring or, machinery, that's just him repairing some rooms, that's all. So don't be alarmed, I promise everything is okay, everything is taken care of and everything is safe, just gotta fix some rooms, okay? Okay, I'm sorry if you hear the noise. I can't control it. So, yeah. Just let me know if it becomes a bother. I'll try to fix my sound settings, okay? Okay. Alright, let's continue. Okay, hold on. Cal! Hi, Cal. Thank you for coming. I'm so happy to see you. Okay, let's see, where was I? Let me start over from where I last left. Okay. Food, however, became scarce, and I often spent the whole day in searching in vain for a few acorns to assuage the pains of hunger. When I found this, I resolved to quit the place that I had hitherto inhabited, to seek one where the few wants I experienced would be more easily satisfied. In this emigration, I exceedingly lamented the loss of the fire which I had obtained through accident, and knew not how to reproduce it. I gave several hours to the serious consideration of this difficulty, but I was obliged to relinquish all attempts to supply it, and wrapping myself in the cloak, I struck across the wood towards the setting sun. I passed 3 days in these rambles, and at length discovered the open country. A great fall of snow had taken place the night before, and the fields were one of uniform white. The appearance was disconsolate. Excuse me. And I found my feet chilled by the cold, damp substance that covered the ground. It was about 7 in the morning, and I longed to obtain food and shelter. At length I perceived a small hut on a rising ground, which had doubtless been built for the convenience of some shepherd. This was a new sight for me, and I examined the structure with great curiosity. Finding the door open, I entered. An old man sat in it, near a fire, over which he was preparing his breakfast. He turned on hearing a noise, and, perceiving me, shrieked loudly, and, quitting the hut, ran across the field with the speed of which his debilitated form hardly appeared capable. His appearance different from any I had seen before, and his flight somewhat surprised me. But I was enchanted by the appearance of the hut. Here the snow and rain could not penetrate. The ground was dry, and it presented to me them as exquisite and divine a retreat as pandemonium appeared to the demons of hell after the suffering in the lake of fire. I greedily devoured the remnants of the shepherd's breakfast, which consisted of bread, cheese, milk, and wine. The latter, however, I did not like. Then, overcome by fatigue, I laid down amongst some straw and fell asleep. It was noon when I awoke. It was noon when I awoke, and lured by the warmth of the sun, which shone brightly on the white ground, I determined to recommence my travel, and, depositing the remains of the peasant's breakfast in a wallet I found, I proceeded across the fields for several hours, until at sunset I arrived at a village. How miraculous this did disappear! The huts, the neater cottages, and the stately houses engaged my admiration by turns. The vegetables in the garden, the milk and cheese that I saw placed at the window of some of the cottages, allured my appetite. One of the best of these I entered, but I had hardly placed my foot within the door before the children shrieked and one of the women fainted. The whole village was roused. Some fled, some attacked me, until, grievously bruised by stones and many other kinds of missile weapons, I escaped to the open country and fearfully took refuge in a low hovel, quite bare, and making a wretched appearance after the palaces I had beheld in the village. This hovel, however, joined a cottage of a neat and pleasant appearance, but after my late dearly bought experience, I dare not enter it. My place of refuge was constructed of wood, but so low that I could with difficulty sit upright in it. No wood, however, was placed on the earth which formed the floor, but it was dry, and although the wind entered it by immeasurable chinks, I found an agreeable asylum for the snow and rain. Here then I retreated, and lay down happy to have found a shelter, however miserable from the inclemency of the seasons, and still more from the barbarity of man. As soon as morning dawned, I crept from my kennel, that I may view the adjacent cottage, and discovered if I could remain in the habitation I had found. It was situated against the back of the cottage, and surrounded on the sides, which were exposed by a pigsty and a clear pool of water. One part was open, and by that I had crept in, but now I covered every crevice by which I might be perceived with stones and wood, and in such a manner that I might move them on occasion to pass out. All the light I enjoyed came through the sty, and that was sufficient for me. Having thus arranged my dwelling, and carpeted it with clean straw, I retired, for I saw the figure of a man at a distance, and I remembered too well my treatment the night before to trust myself in his power. I had first, however, provided for my sustenance for that day by a loaf of coarse bread, which I purloined, and a cup with which I could drink, more conveniently than from my hand, of the pure water which flowed by my retreat. The floor was a little raised, so that I was kept perfectly dry, and by its vicinity to the chimney of the cottage it was tolerably warm. Being thus provided, I resolved to reside in this hovel until something should occur which might alter my determination. It was indeed a paradise compared to the bleak forest, my former residence, and the rain-dropping branches and dank earth. I ate my breakfast with pleasure, and was about to remove a plank to procure myself a little water, when I heard a step, and looking through a small chink, beheld a young creature, with a pail on her head, passing before my hovel. The girl was young and of a gentle demeanor, unlike what I have since found cottagers and farmhouse servants to be. Yet she was meanly dressed, a coarse blue petticoat and a linen jacket being her only garb. Her fair hair was plaited, but not adored. She looked patient, yet sad. I lost sight of her, and in about a quarter of an hour she returned, bearing the pail, which was now partly filled with milk. As she walked along, seeming incommoded by the burden, a young man met her, whose countenance expressed a deeper despondence. Uttering a few sounds with an air of melancholy, he took the pail from her head and bore it to the cottage himself. She followed, and they disappeared. Presently I saw the young man again with some tools in his hand, cross the field behind the cottage, and the girl was also busied, sometimes in the house, sometimes in the yard. On examining my dwelling, I found that one of the windows of the cottage had formerly occupied a part of it, but the panes had been filled up with wood. In one of these was a small, almost imperceptible chink, through which the eye could just barely penetrate. Through this crevice a small room was visible, whitewashed and clean, but very bare of furniture. In one corner, near a small fire, sat an old man, leaning his head on his hands in disconsolate attitude. The young girl was occupied in arranging the cottage, but presently she took something out of a drawer, which employed her hands, and she sat down beside the old man, who, taking up an instrument, began to play, and to produce sounds sweeter than the voice of the thrush or nightingale. It was a lovely sight, even to me, poor wretch, who had never beheld aught beautiful before. The silver hair and benevolent countenance of the aged cottager won my reverence, while the gentle manners of the girl enticed my love. He played a sweet mournful air, which I perceived drew tears from the eyes of this amiable He played a sweet mournful air, which I perceived drew tears from the eyes of his amiable companion, of which the old man took no notice, until she sobbed audibly. Then he pronounced a few sounds, and the fair creature, leaving her work, knelt at his feet. He raised her, and he smiled with such kindness and affection that I felt sensations of a peculiar and overpowering nature. They were a mixture of pain and pleasure, such as I had never experienced before, either from hunger or cold, warmth or food, and I withdrew from the window, unable to bear these emotions. Soon after this the young man returned, bearing on his shoulders a load of wood. The girl met him at the door, helped to relieve him of his burden, and taking some of the fuel into the cottage, placed it on the fire. Then she and the youth went apart into a nook of the cottage, and he showed her a large loaf and a piece of cheese. She seemed pleased, and went into the garden for some root and plant, which she placed in water, then upon the fire. She afterward continued her work, whilst the young man went into the garden, and appeared busily employing in digging and pulling her roots. After he had been employed thus about an hour, the young woman joined him, and they entered the cottage together. The old man had, in the meantime, been pensive, but on the appearance of his companions he assumed a more cheerful air, and they sat down to eat. The meal was quickly dispatched. The young woman was again occupied in arranging the cottage. The old man walked before the cottage in the sun for a few minutes, leaning on the arm of the youth. Nothing could exceed in the beauty and contrast between these two excellent creatures. One was old, with silver hair and a countenance beaming with benevolence and love. The younger was slight and graceful in his figure, and that scared me. I'm so sorry. That scared me. I really wish they didn't have to do the construction now, but they do, because we have to recontain the anomalies, so the construction has to happen fast. I hate it. They wake me up so early for it. I don't like it. Anyway. Let me get some water. Let me get some water. I have water today and coffee because I'm a little hungover. I'm a little hungover from from yesterday's fun. So I have plenty of water. I ate a good breakfast, so don't worry. I'm going to be okay. Refreshing. And it's so hot today too, so that was doubly refreshing. All right, where was I? Okay. Let's see. One was old with silver hairs and a countenance beaming with benevolence and love. The younger was slight and graceful in his figure, and his features were molded with the finest symmetry, yet his eyes and attitude expressed the utmost sadness and despondency. The old man returned to the cottage, and the youth, with tools different from those he had used in the morning, directed his steps across the field. Night quickly shut in, but to my extreme wonder, I found that the cottagers had a means of prolonging light by the use of tapers, and was delighted to find that the setting of the sun did not put an end to the pleasures I experienced in watching my human neighbors. In the evening, the young girl and her companion were employed in various occupations which I did not understand, and the old man again took up his instrument, which produced the divine sounds that had enchanted me in the morning. So soon as he had finished, the youth began, not to play, but to utter sounds that were monotonous, and neither resembling the harmony of the old man's instrument nor the songs of the birds. I since found that he read out loud, but at the time I knew nothing of the science of words or letters. The family, after having been thus occupied for a short time, extinguished their lights and retired, as I conjectured, to rest. Chapter 12. I lay on my straw, but I could not sleep. I thought of the occurrences of the day. What chiefly struck me was the gentle manners of these people, and I longed to join them, but I dared not. I remembered too well the treatment I had suffered the night before from the barbarous villagers, and resolved, for whatever course of conduct I may hereafter think is right to pursue, for the present I would remain quietly in my hovel, watching and endeavoring to discover the motives of which influenced their actions. The cottagers rose the next morning before the sun. The young woman arranged the cottage and prepared the food. The youth departed after the first meal. This day was passed in the same routine that which preceded it. The young man was constantly employed out of doors, and the girl in various laborious occupations within. The old man, whom I soon perceived to be blind, employed his leisure hours on his instrument or in his contemplations. Nothing could exceed the love and respect in which the younger cottagers exhibited towards their venerable companion. They performed towards him every little office of affection and duty with gentleness, and he rewarded them by his benevolent smiles. They were not entirely happy. The young man and his companion often went apart and appeared to weep. I saw no cause for their unhappiness, but I was deeply affected by it. If such lovely creatures were miserable, it was less strange than I, an imperfect and solitary being, should be wretched. Yet, Beans! Where's my Beans? Hello, Beans! Hi, Bean! Bean wants attention. I'm sorry, Beans. I can't give you too much attention. I can't give you too much attention. My silly kitties. Yet why were these gentle beings unhappy? They possessed a delightful house, for it was such in my eyes, and every luxury. They had a fire to warm them. When chill, and delicious viands when hungry. They were dressed in excellent clothes, and still more, they enjoyed one another's company and speech, interchanging each day looks of affection and kindness. What did their tears imply? Did they really express pain? I was at first unable to solve these questions, but my perpetual attention and time explained to me many appearances which were at first enigmatic. A considerable period elapsed before I discovered one of the causes of the uneasiness of this amiable family. It was poverty, and they suffered that evil in a very distressing degree. Their nourishment consisted entirely of the vegetables of their garden and the milk of one cow, which gave very little during the winter, when its masters could scarcely procure food to support it. They often, I believe, suffered the pangs of hunger very poignantly, especially the two young cottagers, for several times they placed food before the old man when they reserved none for themselves. This trait of kindness moved me sensibly. I had been accustomed, during the night, to steal part of their store for my own consumption, but when I found that in doing this I inflicted pain on the cottagers, I abstained, and satisfied myself with berries, nuts, and roots, which I gathered from a neighboring wood. I discovered also another means through which I enabled to assist their labors. I found that the youth spent a great part of each day in collecting wood for the family fire, and during the night I often took his tools, the use of which I quickly discovered, and brought home firings sufficient for the consumption of several days. I remember the first time I did this, the young woman, when she opened the door in the morning, appeared greatly astonished on seeing a great pile of wood on the outside. She uttered some words in a loud voice, and the youth joined her, who also expressed surprise. I observed with pleasure that he did not go to the forest that day, but spent it in repairing the cottage and cultivating the garden. By degrees I made a discovery of still greater moment. I found that these people possessed a method of communicating their experiences and feelings to one another by articulate sounds. I perceived that the words they spoke sometimes produced pleasure or pain, smiles or sadness, and in the minds and countenance of the hearers. This was indeed a godlike science, and I ardently desired to become acquainted with it. But I was baffled in every attempt I made for this purpose. Their pronunciations was quick, and the words they uttered, not having any apparent connection with visible objects, I was unable to discover any clue by which I could unravel the mystery of their reference. By great application, however, and after having remained during the space of several revolutions of the moon in my hovel, I discovered the names that were given to some of the familiar objects in discourse. I learned and applied the words fire, milk, bread, and wood. I learned also the names of the cottagers themselves. The youth and his companion had each of them several names, but the old man had only one, which was father. The girl was called sister, or Agatha, and the youth, Felix, brother or son. I cannot describe Hello, little beans. Hi. She gave me a kiss. She's so sweet. She's so sweet. Aww, she's so sweet. I love my little beans. I love my little beans. She's such a sweetie. Alright. Here we go. I cannot describe the delight I felt when I learned the ideas appropriate to each of these sounds. And was able to pronounce them. I distinguished several of the words, without being able as yet to understand or apply them, such as good, dearest, unhappy. I spent the winter in this manner. The gentle manners and beauty of the cottagers greatly endeared them to me. When they were unhappy, I felt depressed. When they rejoiced, I sympathized in their joys. I saw few human beings beside them, and if any other happened to enter the cottage, their harsh manners and rude gait only enhanced to me the superior accomplishments of my friends. The old man, I could perceive, often endeavored to encourage his children, as sometimes I found that he called them, to cast off their melancholy. He would talk in a cheerful accent, with an expression of goodness that bestowed pleasure even upon me. Agatha listened with respect. Her eyes sometimes filled with tears, which she endeavored to wipe away unperceived, but I generally found that her countenance and tone were more cheerful after having listened to the exhortations of her father. It was not thus with Felix. He was always the saddest of the group, and, even to my unpractised senses, he appeared to have suffered more deeply than his friends. But if his countenance was more sorrowful, his voice was more cheerful than that of his sister, especially when he addressed the old man. I could mention innumerable instances which, although slight, marked the disposition of these amiable cottagers. In the midst of poverty and want, Felix carried with pleasure to his sister the first little white flower that peeped out from beneath the snowy ground. Early in the morning, before she had risen, he cleared away the snow that obstructed her path to the milk house, drew water from the well, and brought the wood from the outhouse, where, to his perpetual astonishment, he found his store always replenished by an invisible hand. In the day, I believed, he worked sometimes from a neighboring farmer, because he often went forth and did not return until dinner. He brought no wood with him. Other times he worked in the garden, but as there was little to do in the frosty season, he read to the old man and Agatha. This reading had puzzled me extremely at first, but by degrees I discovered that he uttered many of the same sounds as when he read as when he talked. I conjectured, therefore, that he found on the paper signs for speech which he understood, and I ardently longed to comprehend these also. But how was that possible, when I did not even understand the sounds for which they stood as signs? I improved, however, sensibly in this science, but not sufficiently to follow up any kind of conversation, though I applied my whole mind to the endeavor, for I easily perceived that, although I eagerly longed to discover myself to the cottagers, I ought to not make the attempt until I had first become master of their language, which knowledge might enable me to make them overlook the deformity of my figure, for with this the contrast perpetually presented to my eyes had made me acquainted. Hi, Jack! Hi! Hi, you only missed one chapter. We're just talking about the monster. The monster's telling a story. I'm so happy you're here, my friend. Hi! Okay, so quick recap. The monster's telling a story about how happened after he left Ingolstadt. He was wandering the forest, trying to survive, learning how to be a person. So he's kind of hiding out in a little hovel next to a cottage where he can observe like these villagers that he found and stuff. So, you know, it's not, you didn't miss much. You didn't miss much. He's just learning how to speak and stuff. He's talking about how he learned how to speak and stuff. So you didn't miss too much. You didn't miss too much at all. I'm happy you're here. Thank you for coming, Jack. Thank you so much. What the heck? Beans, get down, please. Get down from there, please, Beans. Beans is climbing somewhere she's not supposed to. Beans, come down. Come down, pretty girl. Come on. Come down. Come down. She's not gonna listen to me. She's not listening to me today. Beans. Pretty Beans. Okay, you're gonna sleep up there? You're gonna sleep up there? Okay, she's gonna sleep up there. Hopefully she doesn't knock anything down. I don't... She's like on top of a dresser. She's like on top of a really tall dresser. Hold on. Beans, get down, please. Get down. Come on. Good girl. She's such a good girl. Good girl, come. I don't even know how she jumped up there. There's no way to jump up there. Huh. I don't remember where I was. Where was I? Oh, right. Here we go. I had admired the perfect forms of my cottagers, their grace, beauty, and delicate complexions. But how I was terrified when I viewed myself in a transparent pool. At first I started back, unable to believe that it was indeed I who was reflected in the mirror. And when I became fully convinced that I was in reality the monster that I am, I was filled with the bitterest sensations of despondence and mortification. Alas, I did not yet entirely know the fatal effects of this miserable deformity. As the sun became warmer and the light of day longer, the snow vanished, and I beheld the bare trees and the black earth. From this time, Felix was more employed, and the heart-moving indications of impending famine disappeared. Okay. Their food, as I afterwards found, was coarse, but it was wholesome, as they procured a sufficiency of it. Several new kinds of plants sprung up in the garden, which they dressed, and these signs of comfort increased daily as the seasons advanced. The old man, leaning on his son, walked each day at noon, but it did not rain, as I found it was called when the heavens poured forth its waters. This frequently took place, but a high wind quickly dried the earth, and the season became far more pleasant than it had been. My mode of life in my hovel was uniform. During the mornings I attended the motion of the cottagers, and when they were dispersed in various occupations I slept. The remainder of the day was spent in observing my friends. When they had retired to rest, if there was any moon, or the night was starlit, I went into the woods and collected my own food and fuel for the cottage. When I returned, as often as was necessary, I cleared the path from the snow, and performed those offices that had been done by Felix. I afterwards found that these labors performed by an invisible hand greatly astonished them, and once or twice I heard them, on occasions, utter the words "good spirit," "wonderful," but I did not then understand the significance of these terms. My thoughts now became more active, and I longed to discover the motives and feelings of these lovely creatures. I was inquisitive to know why Felix appeared so miserable and Agatha so sad. I thought, foolish wretch, that it may be in my power to restore happiness to these deserving people. When I slept, or was absent, the forms of the venerable blind father, the gentle Agatha, and the excellent Felix flitted before me. I looked upon them as the superior beings, who would be the arbiters of my future destiny. I formed in my imagination 1,000 pictures of presenting myself to them, and their reception of me. I imagined that they would be disgusted until, by my gentle demeanor and consolidating words, I should first win their favor and afterward their love. These thoughts exhilarated me, and led me to apply with fresh ardor. Yes, my sweet girl. Oh my goodness, she's so vocal today. Hello. Hold on, I gotta get her. She wants so much attention today. Oh my goodness. Hello, little bee. Come here. Come here, my sweet. Come on, sweet bee. Do you want attention? And now you got stuck. Come on. Come on. She's like, I want attention, but don't pick me up. Such a silly girl. She's such a silly girl. Oh gosh, where was I? Where's she? Oh no, she's so mischievous today. My sweet girl. What are you playing with? What are you playing? Oh wait, hold on. She's playing with something. Hold on. I gotta get her. Hold on. I'll be right back. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Hold on. Beans, what are you playing with? No, Beans, you can't play with that. That's not a toy. It's not a toy. You can't play with that. Beans. No. I'm back. I had to stop Beans from playing with something she wasn't supposed to play. Thank you, Jack. Thank you for liking my outfit reveal. Thank you. I can do more of those. If I hit 200 followers on Twitter, I promise. 200 followers on Twitter and have 50 subscribers here, I promise I'll do another one. That outfit reveal was just special, but this time I got a goal. 200 followers on Twitter and 50 subscribers here. So, if you want to see another one, you know what to do. Okay, let me get back to it. Lemmy! Hold on. Lemmy's getting annoyed. He's getting as annoyed as I am with all the banging they're doing in the next room. All the construction. Jack, I don't know if you had heard, but they're doing construction in one of the rooms next to me. One of the anomalies had escaped and caused some destruction. So they're doing construction. Creator and his team are doing some construction next door, so you're hearing the whirring and the banging and construction sounds. That's what happens. But I think Lemmy is getting annoyed. Because that scared me too. And I'm getting annoyed because I keep hearing the banging and it's just like doom, doom, doom. My poor ears. It's too loud. It's so loud. My poor ears. It's like with the fireworks yesterday for the 4th of July celebration. I couldn't be outside. It was so pretty to watch, but after a while my ears just started really hurting because of the booms and the bangs and they're just fixing a room. They're reinforcing and fixing a room. We had one of our anomalies escape during the weekend while we were doing the weekly culling and cleaning. And it really broke up the room. Like, the room got completely destroyed. The walls are breaking off. The metal panelings are gone. So they had it was a mess. It was a mess because we got some new anomalies over the weekend as well. So some of them are really hostile. It was a pain. It was a pain to get them it was a pain to try to get them contained, but they destroyed the room. So now we have them in one of the lower sub basements, which is much stronger, more secluded. And Beans is being super vocal today. Yeah, so we put this in the new anomaly in one of the sub levels, which has like much harder and thicker reinforced walls. It's like a vault almost. So we have them locked in there. So like it's like the lower levels are for like more high security and more, like more dangerous stuff. While the upper levels, like me up here and Lemmy and stuff, it's not as enforced. We have a lot of free roaming anomalies that are pretty harmless, and then we have some anomalies that aren't like they're not safe, but they're not hostile. So it can be we had. It's like a varying level of difficulty. You know what I mean? The lower you get, the more dangerous and volatile creatures you get. We try to contain one of the creatures in the room next door to me, so that way we can before accessing the lower vaults. But they were extremely hostile, and Creator and I and the whole team had to subdue it. Had to subdue it, and it was a pain. I don't like fighting. I don't like fighting, and this thing was weirdly sticky. It was weirdly sticky, and I didn't like I didn't like it at all. It was gross. It was gross. It was super gross. It was super gross. So now they're just fixing up the room. So yeah. They're just fixing up the room. I ran out of water. Oh no, I ran out of water. I'm gonna be right back. I need to go back up. I need to go up. I need to go up to the house and get some water because I'm super thirsty. I didn't kill it. I subdued it. There's a difference. But I'll be right back. I'm gonna put my be right back screen because I'm gonna get some more water and take care of Beans because she's super vocal. So I think she wants something. Okay? I promise. I'll be right back. I'll be right back. I promise. I promise. I promise. I promise. I promise. I'll be right back. I promise. I promise. got some water, and I checked in on Creator to make sure he was doing okay. He's doing great. He yelled at me, so I think he's doing great. Also, I'm not a murderer. Jack, how dare you? I didn't unalive anything. I didn't unalive anything. How rude. How rude. I didn't unalive anything. I am strictly not... I'm against unaliving things. I'm a pacifist. I'm a pacifist. I'm a pacifist. I don't unalive anything. How rude. How rude. I'm sorry. Sorry for the constriction. Yeah, I'm back. Jack, that was super rude. I am not a mower. I am a pacifist. But I know how to defend myself, and I know how to defend my friends. And Creator is Creator, and I have to... Why would I subdue you? You didn't do anything. You're not attacking me or nothing, so I'm not going to subdue you. You're fine. You're fine. I'd rather give you a hug. I'd rather give you a hug. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. This construction is so annoying. The construction is so annoying. I'm so sorry, everybody. I'm so sorry, everybody. You have to listen to the stupid construction stuff that the Creator and his team are doing. I'm sorry. It's annoying. So annoying. But I got water. I got more water. I got more water, so I'm gonna hydrate. Creator keeps like one of those water cooler things, like the ones you would see in the office where you have to replace the water bottle all the time. He has one of those down here, but I don't like drinking from that. I don't know. I don't like drinking from that because all the other anomalies that live on this floor, they tend to like touch it and stuff too. So it's like, I don't want to touch it because I don't know where their germs have been. You know? Creative's doing construction now because it's necessary. It's necessary because we need the rooms. We need the rooms. He's also been talking about adding more rooms to this level, and it's just so annoying because I hear the banging, and it's so I don't like it. My poor ears can't handle it. They're too sensitive. Okay. I need to continue reading. Hold on. Get myself back to where I was. Don't know what page I was on. What page was I on? Ah! Oh, that one scared me. I wouldn't recommend it. Jack. I wouldn't recommend it. We could be housemates. Yeah. Listen, Lucian. Just because I hit you with the pillow one time doesn't mean anything. So shush. There are a lot of weird sounds coming out of the basement today. I'm sorry. There's a lot of weird sounds coming from the basement. Okay, I'm gonna continue reading. Let's ignore those sounds. I'm gonna continue reading. Hold on. Ah! That one scared me. That scared me. Okay. Where was I? Okay. Just fixing my mic real quick. Okay. Let's go. Okay. These thoughts exhilarated me, and led me to apply with fresh ardor to acquiring the art of language. My organs were indeed harsh but supple, and although my voice was very unlike the soft music of their tones, I pronounced such words as I understood with tolerable ease. It was as the ass and the lapdog, yet surely the gentle ass whose intentions were affectionate, although his manners were rude and deserved better treatment than blows and execration. The pleasant showers and genial warmth of spring greatly altered the aspect of the earth. Men, who before this change seemed to have been hid in caves, dispersed themselves and were employed in various arts of cultivation. The birds sang in more cheerful notes, and the leaves began to bud forth on trees. Happy, happy, happy earth. Fit habitation for gods, which so short a time before was bleak, damp, and unwholesome. My spirits were elevated by the enchanting appearance of nature. The past was blotted from my memory. The present was tranquil, and the future gilded by bright rays of hope and anticipations of joy. My reactions are scary. My reactions are scaring you, Jack. I'm sorry. It's just every time I hear it, I'm like, ah! Because it freaks me out. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Now, Chapter 13. Chapter 13. I now hasten to the more moving part of my story. I shall relate the events that impressed me with feelings which, from what I had been, have made me what I am. Spring advanced rapidly. The weather became fine, and the skies cloudless. It surprised me that what before was desert and gloomy should now bloom with the most beautiful flowers and verdure. My senses were gratified and refreshed by 1,000 scents of delight and 1,000 sights of beauty. It was on one of these days, when my cottagers periodically rested from labor, the old man played on his guitar and the children listened to him, that I observed the countenance of Felix was melancholy beyond expression. He sighed frequently, and once his father paused in his music, and I conjectured by his manner that he inquired the cause of his son's sorrow. Felix replied in a cheerful accent, and the old man was recommencing with his music, when someone tapped at the door. It was a lady on horseback, accompanied by a countryman as a guide. The lady was dressed in a dark suit and covered with a thick black veil. Agatha asked a question, to which the stranger only replied by pronouncing, in a sweet accent, the name of Felix. Her voice was musical, but unlike that of either of my friends. On hearing this word, Felix came up hastily to the lady, who, when she saw him, threw up her veil, and I beheld a countenance of an angelic beauty and expression. Her hair of a shining raven black, and curiously braided. Her eyes were dark but gentle, although animated, her features of irregular proportion, and her complexion wondrously fair, each cheek tinged with a lovely pink. Felix seemed ravished with delight when he saw her. Every trait of sorrow vanished from his face, and it instantly impressed a degree of ecstatic joy, of which I could hardly have believed it capable. His eyes sparkled as his cheeks flushed with pleasure, and at that moment I thought of him as beautiful as the stranger. She appeared affected by different feelings. Wiping a few tears from her lovely eyes, she held out her hand to Felix, who kissed it rapturously, and called her, as well as I could distinguish, his sweet Arabian. She did not appear to understand him, but smiled. He assisted her to dismount, and dismissing her guide, conducted her into the cottage. Some conversation took place between him and his father, and the young stranger knelt at the old man's feet, and would have kissed his hand, but he raised her and embraced her affectionately. I soon perceived that, although the stranger uttered articulate sounds and appeared to have a language of her own, she was neither understood by, nor herself understood the cottagers. They made many signs which I did not comprehend, but I saw that her presence diffused gladness throughout the cottage, dispelling their sorrow as the sun dissipates the morning mist. Felix seemed peculiarly happy, and with smiles of delight welcomed his Arabian. Agatha, the ever-gentle Agatha, kissed the hands of the lovely stranger, and pointing to her brother, made signs which appeared to mean that he had been sorrowful until she came. Some hours passed thus, while they, by their countenance, expressed joy, the cause of which I did not comprehend. Presently I found, by the frequent recurrence of some sound which the stranger repeated after them, that she was endeavoring to learn their language, and the idea instantly occurred to me that I should make use of the same instructions to the same end. The stranger learned about 20 words at the first lesson. Most of them, indeed, were those of which I had before understood, but I profited by the others. As night came on, Agatha and the Arabian retired early. When they separated, Felix kissed the hand of the stranger and said, "Good night, sweet Safi." He sat up much longer, conversing with his father, and by the frequent repetition of her name, I conjectured that their lovely guest was the subject of their conversation. I ardently desired to understand them, and bent every faculty towards that purpose, but found it utterly impossible. The next morning Felix went out to his work, and after the usual occupations of Agatha were finished, the Arabian sat at the feet of the old man, and taking his guitar, played some airs so entrancingly beautiful that they at once drew tears of sorrow and delight from my eyes. She sang, and her voice flowed in a rich cadence, swelling or dying away like a nightingale of the woods. When she had finished, she gave the guitar to Agatha, who at first declined it. She played a simple air, and her voice accompanied it in sweet accents. But unlike the wondrous strain of the stranger, the old man appeared enraptured, and said some words, which Agatha endeavored to explain to Safie, and by which he appeared to wish to express that she bestowed on him the greatest delight by her music. The days now passed as peaceably as before, with the sole alteration that joy had taken place of sadness in this countenance of my friends. Safie was always gay and happy. She and I improved rapidly in the knowledge of language, and so that in 2 months I began to comprehend most of the words uttered by my protectors. In the meanwhile, also the black ground was covered with herbage, and the green banks interspersed with innumerable flowers, sweet to the scent and the eyes, stars of pale radiance among the moonlight woods. The sun became warmer, the nights clear and balmy, and my nocturnal rambles were an extreme pleasure to me, although they were considerably shortened by the late setting and early rising of the sun, for I never ventured abroad during daylight, fearful of meeting with the same treatment I had formerly endured in the first village which I entered. My days were spent in close attention, that I might more speedily master the language, and that I may boast that I improved more rapidly than the Arabian, who understood very little and conversed in broken accents, as I comprehended and could imitate almost every word that was spoken. While I improved in speech, I also learned the science of letters, and as it was taught to the stranger, this opened before me a wide field for wonder and delight. The book from which Felix extracted Safie was Volney's Ruins of Empires. I should not have understood the purport of the book, had not Felix, in reading it, given very minute explanations. He had chosen this work, he said, because the declamatory style was famed in imitation of the Eastern authors. Though this work I attained a cursory knowledge of history, and a view of several empires at present existing in the world. It gave me an insight into the manners, governments, and religions of different nations of the earth. I heard of the slothful Asiatics, of the stupendous genius and mental activity of the Grecians, of the wars and wonderful virtue of the early Romans, of their subsequent degeneration, of the decline of that mighty empire, of chivalry, Christianity, and kings. I heard of the discovery of the American hemisphere, and wept with Safie over the hapless fate of its original inhabitants. These wonderful narrations inspired me with strange feeling. Was man indeed at once so powerful, so virtuous and magnificent, yet so vicious and base? He appeared at one time a mere scion of evil principle, and another as all that can be conceived of noble and godlike. To be a great and virtuous man appeared the highest honor that can befall a sensitive being. To be base and vicious, as many on record have been, appeared the lowest degradation, a condition more abject than that of the blind mole or harmless worm. For a long time I could not conceive how one man could go forth to murder his fellow, or even why there were laws and governments. But when I heard details of vice and bloodshed, my wonder ceased, and I turned away with disgust and loathing. Every conversation of the cottagers now opened new wonders to me. While I listened to the instructions which Felix bestowed upon the Arabian, the strange system of human society was explained to me. I heard of the division of property, of immense wealth and squalid poverty, of rank, descent, and noble blood. The words induced me to turn toward myself. I learned that the possessions most esteemed by your fellow creatures were high and unsullied descent united with riches. A man might be respected with only one of these advantages, but without either he was considered, except in very rare instances, as a vagabond and a slave, doomed to waste his powers for the profit of the chosen few. And what was I? Of my creation and creator, I was absolutely ignorant. But I knew that I possessed no money, no friends, no kind of property. I was, besides, endued with a figure hideously deformed and loathsome. I was not even of the same nature as man. I was more agile than they, and could subsist upon a coarser diet. I bore the extremes of heat and cold with less injury to my frame. My stature far exceeds theirs. When I looked around, I saw and heard none like me. Was I then a monster, a blot upon the earth, from which all men fled, and whom all men disowned? I could not describe to you the agony that these reflections inflicted upon me. I tried to dispel them, but sorrow only increased with knowledge. All that I had forever remained in my native wood, nor known nor felt beyond the sensations of hunger, thirst, and heat. Of what a strange nature is knowledge. It clings to the mind, when I was once seized on it, like a lichen on a rock. I wished sometimes to shake off all thought and feeling, but I learned that there was but one means to overcome the sensation of pain, and that was death, a state I which I feared yet did not understand. A state of which I feared yet did not understand. I admired virtue and good feelings, and loved the gentle manners and amiable qualities of my cottagers, but I was shut out from intercourse with them, except through means which I obtained by stealth, when I was unseen and unknown, and which rather increased and satisfied the desire I had of becoming one among my fellows. The gentle words of Agatha, and the animated smiles of the charming Arabian, were not for me. The mild exhortations of the old man, and the lively conversations of loved Felix, were not for me, miserable and happy wretch. Other lessons were impressed upon me even more deeply. I heard of the difference of sexes, of the birth and growth of children, how the father doted on the smiles of the infant, and the lively sallies of the older child, how all the life and cares of the mother were wrapped up in the precious charge, how the mind of youth expanded and gained knowledge, a brother, sister, and all the various relationships which bind one human being to another in mutual bonds. But where are my friends and relations? No father had watched my infant days, no mother had blessed me with smiles and caresses, or if they had, all my past life was now a blot, a blind vacancy in which I distinguished nothing. From my earliest remembrance I had been as I then was in height and proportion. I had never yet seen a being resemble me, who could claim any intercourse with me. What was I? The question again reoccurred, to be answered only with groans. I will soon explain to what these feelings tended, but allow me now to return to the cottagers, whose stories excited me in such various feelings of indignation, delight, and wonder, but which all terminated in additional love and reverence for my protectors, for so I loved, in an innocent, half-painful self-deceit, to call them. Chapter 14. Some time elapsed before I learned the history of my friends. It was one which could not fail to impress itself deeply on my mind, unfolding as it did a number of circumstances, each interesting and wonderful to one so utterly inexperienced as I was. The name of the old man was de Lacy. He was descended from a good family in France, which he had lived for many years in affluence, respected by his superiors and beloved by his equals. His son was bred in the service of his country, and Agatha had ranked with ladies of the highest distinction. A few months before my arrival, they had lived in a large and luxurious city called Paris, surrounded by friends, and possessed of every enjoyment which virtue, refinement of intellect, or taste, accompanied by a moderate fortune, could afford. The father of Safie had been the cause of their ruin. He was a Turkish merchant, and had inhabited Paris for many years, when, for some reason I could not learn, he became obnoxious to the government. He was seized and cast into prison the very day Safie arrived from Constantinople to join them. He was tried and condemned to death. The injustice of his sentence was very flagrant. All Paris was indignant, and it was judged that his religion and wealth, rather than the crime alleged against him, had been the cause of his condemnation. Felix had accidentally been present at the trial. His horror and indignation were uncontrollable when he heard the decision of the court. He made, at that moment a solemn vow to deliver him, and then looked around for the means. After many fruitless attempts to gain admittance to the prison, he found a strongly grated window with an unguarded part of the building, which lighted the dungeon of the unfortunate Mahometan, who, loaded with chains, waited in despair of the execution of the barbarous sentence. Felix visited the grate at night, and made known to the prisoner his intentions in his favor. The Turk, amazed and delighted, endeavored to kindle the zeal of his deliverer by promises of reward and wealth. Felix rejected his offers with contempt, yet when he saw the lovely Safi, who was allowed to visit her father, and who, by her gestures, expressed her lively gratitude, the youth could not help owning to his own mind that the captive possessed a treasure which he would fully reward his toils and hazard. The Turk quickly perceived the impressions that his daughter had made on the heart of Felix, and endeavored to secure him more entirely in his interests by the promise of her hand in marriage so soon as he should be conveyed to a place of safety. Felix was too delicate to accept this offer. He looked forward to the probability of the event as to the consummation of his happiness. During the ensuing days, while the preparations were going forward for the escape of the merchant, the zeal of Felix was warmed by several letters that he received from this lovely girl, who found means to express her thoughts in the language of her lover by the aid of an old man, a servant of her father, who understood French. She thanked him in the most ardent terms for his intended services toward her parent, and at the same time she gently deplored her own fate. I have copies of these letters, for I found means, during my residence in the hovel, to procure the implements of writing, and the letters were often in the hands of Felix or Agatha. Before I depart, I will give them to you. They will prove the truth of my tale. But at present, as the sun is already far declined, I shall only have time to repeat the substance of them to you. Safi related that her mother was a Christian Arab, seized and made a slave by the Turks. Commended by her beauty, she had won the heart of her father of Safi, who married her. The young girl spoke in high and enthusiastic terms of her mother, who, born in freedom, spurned the bondage to which she was now reduced. She instructed her daughter in the tenets of her religion, and taught her to aspire to higher powers of intellect and an independence of spirit, forbidding to the female followers of Mahomet. This lady died, but her lessons were indelibly impressed on the mind of Safi, who sickened at the prospect of again returning to Asia and being immured within the walls of a harem, allowed to only occupy herself with infantile amusements, ill-suited to the temper of her soul, now accustomed to grand ideas and a noble emulation for virtue. The prospect of marrying a Christian and remaining in a country where women were allowed to take a rank in society was enchanting to her. The day for the execution of the Turk was fixed, but on the night previous to it he quitted his prison, and before morning was distant many leagues from Paris. Felix had procured passports in the name of his father, sister, and himself. He had previously communicated his plans to the former, who aided the deceit by quitting his house under the pretense of a journey, and concealed himself with his daughter in an obscure part of Paris. Felix conducted the fugitive through France to Lyons, and across Mont Cenis to Leghorn, where the merchant had decided to wait a favorable opportunity of passing into some part of the Turkish dominions. Safi resolved to remain with her father until the moment of his departure, before which time the Turk renewed his promise that she should be united to his deliverer, and Felix remained with them in expectations of that event, and in the meantime he enjoyed the society of the Arabian, who exhibited towards him the simplest and tenderest affections. They conversed with one another through the means of an interpreter, and sometimes with the interpretation of looks, and Safi sang to him the divine airs of her native country. The Turk allowed this intimacy to take place, and encouraged the hopes of the youthful lovers, while in his heart he had formed far other plans. He loathed the idea that his daughter should be united to a Christian, but he feared the resentment of Felix if he should appear lukewarm, for he knew that he was still in the power of his deliverer, if he should choose to betray him to the Italian state which they inhabited. He revolved 1,000 plans by which he should be enabled to prolong the deceit until it may no longer be necessary, and secretly to take his daughter with him when he departed. His plans were facilitated by the news which arrived from Paris. The government of France was greatly enraged at the escape of their victim, and spared no pains to detect and punish his deliverer. The plot of Felix was quickly discovered, and De Lacy and Agatha were thrown into prison. The news reached Felix and roused him from his dream of pleasure. his blind and aged father and his gentle sister lay in a noisome dungeon, while he enjoyed the free air in the society of her whom he loved. This idea was torture to him. He quickly arranged with the Turks that if the latter should find a favorable opportunity for escape before Felix could return to Italy, Safi should remain as a boarder at the convenience at Leghorn. Then, quitting the lovely Arabian, he hastened to Paris and delivered himself up to the vengeance of the law, hoping to free the Lacey and Agatha by this proceeding. Yeah, I got a new subscriber! Oh, Ashley! Ash, thank you! Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for being here. Thank you. I'm so happy. Thank you so much. Oh. He did not succeed. They remained confined for 5 months before the trial took place, the result of which deprived them of their fortune and condemned them to a perpetual exile from their native country. They found a miserable asylum in the cottage in Germany where I discovered them. Felix soon learned that the treacherous Turk, from whom he and his family endured such unheard-of oppression, on discovering that his deliverer was thus reduced to poverty and ruin, became a traitor to good feelings and honor, had quitted Italy with his daughter, insultingly sending Felix a pittance of money to aid him, as he said. Wait, I'm sorry? Wait. What's that? Yeah! Ashley Rosenkrantz, thank you for subscribing! Thank you for subscribing! I'm so happy that you could be here! Thank you! Thank you for being here, you're so sweet. Thank you. I hope you're enjoying the stream. Thank you for being here. Where was I? Here we go. Such were the events that preyed on the heart of Felix and rendered him, when I first saw him, the most miserable of his family. He could have endured poverty, and while the distress had been the meed of his virtue, he gloried in it. But the ingratitude of the Turk, and the loss of his beloved Safi, were misfortunes more bitter and irreparable. The arrival of the Arabian was now infused new life into his soul. With the new reached Leghorn that Felix was deprived of his wealth and rank, the merchant commanded his daughter to think no more of her lover, but to prepare to return to her native country. The generous nature of Safi was outraged by this command. She attempted to expostulate her with her father, but he left her angrily, reiterating his tyrannical mandate. A few days after, the Turk entered into his daughter's apartment and told her hastily they had reasons to believe that the residence at Leghorn had been divulged, and that he should speedily be delivered up to the French government. He had, consequently, hired a vessel to convey him to Constantinople, for which city he should sail in a few hours. He intended to leave his daughter under the care of a confidential servant, to follow at her leisure with the greater part of his property, which had not yet arrived at Leghorn. When alone, Safi resolved in her own mind a plan of conduct that it would become her to pursue in this emergency. A residence in Turkey was aberrant to her. Her religion and her feelings were alike adverse to it. By some papers of her father, which fell into her hands, she heard of the exile of her lover, and learnt the name of the spot where she had then resided. She hesitated for some time, but at length formed her determination. Taking with her some jewels that belonged to her, and a sum of money, she quitted Italy with an attendant, a native of Leghorn, but who understood the common language of Turkey, and departed for Germany. She arrived in safety at a town about 20 leagues from the cottage of the Lacey, where her attendant fell dangerously ill. Safi nursed her with the utmost devoted affections, but the poor girl died, and the Arabian was left alone, unacquainted with the language of the country, and utterly ignorant of the customs of the world. She fell, however, into good hands. The Italian had mentioned the name of a spot for which they were bound, and after her death the woman of the house in which they had lived took care that Safi should arrive in safety at the cottage of her lover. Chapter 15. Such was the history of my beloved cottagers. It impressed me deeply. I learned from the views of social life which it developed to admire their virtues and to depreciate the vices of mankind. As yet I looked upon the crimes as a distant evil. Benevolence and generosity were ever present before me, inciting within me a desire to become an actor in the busy scene where so many admirable qualities were called forth and displayed. But in giving an account of the progress of my intellect, I must not omit a circumstance which occurred in the beginning of the month of August on the same year. One night during my accustomed visit to a neighboring wood, where I collected my own food and brought home firing for my protectors, I found on the ground a leather portmanteau containing several articles of dress and some books. I eagerly seized the prize and returned with it into my hovel. Fortunately, the books were written in a language, the elements of which I had acquired on the cottage. They consisted of Paradise Lost, a volume of Plutarch's Life, and Sorrows of the Water. The possession of these treasures gave me extreme delight. I now continually studied and exercised my mind upon these histories, whilst my friends were employed in their ordinary occupations. I can hardly describe to you the effect of these books. They produced in me an infinity of new images and feelings that sometimes raised me to ecstasy, but more frequently sucked me into the lowest dejection. In the Sorrows of Water, beside the interest of its simple and affecting stories, so many opinions are canvassed, and so many lights thrown upon what I had hitherto had been to me obscure subjects, that I found it a never-ending source of speculation and astonishment. The gentle and domestic manners it described, combined with lofty sentiments and feelings, which had for their objects something out of self, accorded well with my experience among my protectors, and with the wants which were forever alive in my own bosom. But I had thought Warder himself a more divine being than I had ever beheld or imagined. His character contained no pretension, but it sunk deep. The disquisitions upon death and suicide were calculated to fill me with wonder. I did not pretend to enter into the merits of the case, yet I inclined toward the opinions of the hero, whose extinction I wept, without precisely understanding it. As I read, however, I applied much personally to my own feelings and conditions. I found myself similar, yet at the same time strangely unlike the beings concerning of whom I read, and to whose conversations I was a listener. I sympathized with and partly understood them, but I was uninformed in mind. I was dependent on none and related to none. The path of my departure was free, and there was none to lament my annihilation. My person was hideous and my stature gigantic. What did this mean? Who was I? What was I? Whence did I come? What was my destination? These questions continually reoccurred, but I was unable to solve them. The volumes of Plutarch's Lives, which I possessed, contained the histories of the first founders of the ancient republics. This book had a far different effect upon me from the Sorrows of Water. I learned from Warder's imagination despondency and gloom, but Plutarch taught me high thoughts. He elevated me above the wretched sphere of my own reflections to admire and love the heroes of past ages. Many things I read surpassed my understanding and experience. I had a very confused knowledge of kingdoms, wide extents of country, mighty rivers and boundless seas, but I was perfectly unacquainted with the towns and large assemblages of men. The cottage of my protectors had been the only school in which I had studied human nature, but this book developed new and mightier scenes of action. I read of men concerned in public affairs, governing or massacring their species. I felt the greatest ardor for virtue rise within me, and abhorrence for vice as far as I understood the signification of those terms, relative as they were as I applied them, to pleasure and pain alone. Induced by these feelings, I was of course led to admire peaceable lawgivers, Numa, Solon, Lycurgus, in preference to Romulus and Theseus. The patriarchal lives of my protectors caused these impressions to take a firm hold on my mind. Perhaps if my first introduction to humanity had been made by a younger soldier, burning for glory and slaughter, I should have been imbued with different sensations. But Paradise Lost excited different and far deeper emotions. I read it, as I had read the other volumes in which had fallen into my hands, as a true history. It moved every feeling of wonder and awe, and the picture of my omnipotent God warring with his creatures was capable of exciting. I often referred to several situations, as they similarly struck me to my own. Like Adam, I was apparently united by no link to any other being in existence, but his state was far different from mine in every other aspect. He had come forth from the hands of God a perfect creature, happy and prosperous, guarded by the especial care of his Creator. He was allowed to converse with and acquire knowledge from beings of a superior nature, but I was wretched, helpless, and alone. Many times I considered Satan as the fitter emblem of my condition, for often, like him, when I viewed the bliss of my protectors, the bitter gall of envy rose within me. Another circumstance strengthened and confirmed these feelings. Soon after my arrival in the hovel, I discovered some papers in the pocket of the dress which I had taken from your laboratory. At first I had neglected them, but now that I was able to decipher the characters in which they were written, I began to study them with diligence. It was your journal of the 4 months that had preceded my creation. You minutely described these papers every step you took in the progress of your work. This history was mingled with the accounts of domestic occurrences. You, doubtless, recollected these papers. Here they are, everything in relation to them which bears reference to my accursed origins, the whole detail of that series of disgusting circumstances which produced it is set in view. The minutest description of my odious and loathsome person is given, in language which has painted your own horrors and rendered mine indelible. I sickened as I read. Hateful day when I received life, I exclaimed in agony. Accursed Creator, why did you form a monster so hideous that even you turned from me in disgust? God in pity made man beautiful and alluring, after his own image, but my form is filthy, the filthy type of yours, more horrid even from the veriest resemblance. Satan had his companions, fellow devils, to admire and encourage him, but I am solitary and abhorred. These were the reflections of my hours of despondency and solitude. When I contemplated the virtues of the cottagers, their amiable and benevolent dispositions, I persuaded myself that when they should become acquainted with my admiration of their virtues, they would compassionate me, and overlook my personal deformity. Could they turn from their door one, however monstrous, who solicited their compassions and friendship? I resolved, at least, not to despair, but in every way to fit myself for an interview with them, for which they would decide my fate. I postponed this attempt for some months longer, for the importance attached to its success inspired me with a dread lest should I fail. Besides, I found that my understanding improved so much with every day's experience that I was unwilling to commence this undertaking until a few more months should have added to my sagacity. Several changes, in the meantime, took place in the cottage. The presence of Sapphi diffused happiness among its inhabitants, and I also found that a greater degree of plenty reigned here. Felix and Agatha spent more time in amusement and conversation, and they were assisted in their labors by servants. They did not appear rich, but they were content and happy. Their feelings were serene and peaceful, while mine became every day more tumultuous. Increase of knowledge only discovered to me more clearly what a wretched outcast I was. I cherished hope, it is true, but it vanished when I beheld my person reflected in the water, or my shadow in the moonlight, even as that frail image in that inconstant shade. I endeavored to crush these fears, and to fortify myself from the trial which in a few months I resolved to undergo. And sometimes I allowed my thoughts, unchecked by reason, to ramble in the fields of paradise, and dared to fancy amiable and lovely creatures sympathizing with my feelings, and cherishing my gloom. Their angelic countenances breathed smiles of consolation. But it was all a dream. No Eve would soothe my sorrows, nor shared my thoughts. I was alone. I remembered Adam's supplication to his Creator, but where was mine? He had abandoned me, and in the bitterness of my heart I cursed him. Autumn passed thus. I saw, with surprising grief, that the leaves decay and fall, and nature again assumed the barren and bleak appearance it had worn when I first beheld the woods and the lovely moon. Yet I did not heed the bleakness of weather. I was better fitted by my conformation for the endurance of cold than heat. But my chief delights were the sight of the flowers, the birds, and all the gay apparel of summer, When those deserted me, I turned with more attention towards the cottagers. Their happiness was not decreased by their absence of summer. They loved and sympathized with one another, and their joys, depending on each other, were not interrupted by the casualties that took place around them. The more I saw of them, the greater my desire to claim their protection and kindness. My heart yearned to be known and loved by these amiable creatures. To see their sweet looks directed towards me with affection was the utmost limit of my ambition. I dare not think that they would turn them from me with disdain and horror. The poor that stopped at their door were never driven away. I asked, "Is it true? For greater treasures than a little food or rest, I required kindness and sympathy, but I did not believe myself utterly unworthy of it." The winter advanced, and an entire revolution of the seasons had taken place since I awoke to life. My attention at this time was solely directed towards my plan of introducing myself to the cottage of my protectors. I resolved many projects, but that on which I finally fixed was to enter the dwelling when the blind man should be alone. I had sagacity enough to discover that the unnatural hideousness of my person was the chief object of horror with those who had formerly beheld me. My voice, although harsh, had nothing terrible in it. I thought, therefore, that if, in the absence of his children, I could gain the goodwill and meditation of the old Lacey, I might, by his means, be tolerated by my younger protectors. One day, when the sun shined on the red leaves that strewed the ground, and diffused cheerfulness, although it denied warmth, Sapphy, Agatha, and Felix departed on a long country walk, and the old man, at his own desire, was left alone in the cottage. When his children had departed, he took up his guitar, and played several mournful but sweet airs, more sweet and mournful than I had ever heard him play before. At first his countenance was illuminated with pleasure, but as he continued, thoughtfulness and sadness succeeded. At length, laying aside the instrument, he sat absorbed in his reflection. My heart beat quick, and this is the hour and moment of trial which would decide my hopes or realize my fears. The servants were gone to a neighboring fair. All was silent in and around the cottage. It was an excellent opportunity, yet when I proceeded to execute my plans, my limbs failed me, and I sank to the ground. Again I rose, and, exerting all the firmness of which I was master, removed the planks which I had placed before my hovel to conceal my retreat. The fresh air revived me, and with renewed determination I approached the door of the cottage. I knocked. "Who is there?" said the old man. "Come in." I entered. "Pardon the intrusion," said I. "I am a traveler in want of a little rest. You would greatly oblige me if you allow me to remain a few minutes before the fire." "Enter," said De Lacy, "and I will try in what manner I can to relieve your wants. But unfortunately my children are from home, and, as I am blind, I am afraid I shall find difficulty in procuring food for you." "Do not trouble yourself, my kind host. I have food. It is warmth and rest I only need." I sat down, and the silence ensued. I knew that every minute was precious to me, yet I remained irresolute with what manner to commence the interview, when the old man addressed me. "By your language, stranger, I suppose you are my countryman. Are you French?" "No, but I was educated by a French family. And understanding that language only, I am now going to claim the protection of some friends whom I sincerely love, in whose favor I have some hopes." "Are they Germans?" "No, they are French. But let us change the subject. I am an unfortunate and deserted creature. I look around and have no relation or friend upon earth. These amiable people whom I go to have never seen me, and know little of me. I am full of fears, for if I fail there, I am an outcast to the world forever." Do not despair. To be friendless is indeed to be unfortunate, but the hearts of men, when unprejudiced by any obvious self-interest, are full of brotherly love and charity. Rely, therefore, on your hopes, and if these friends are good and amiable, do not despair. They are kind. They are the most excellent creatures in the world, but unfortunately they are prejudiced against me. I have good disposition. My life has been hitherto harmless, in some degrees beneficial, but a fatal prejudice clouds their eyes. Where they ought to see a feeling and kind friend, they behold only a detestable monster. That is indeed unfortunate, but if you really are blameless, can you not undeceive them? I'm about to undertake that task. It is on that account that I feel so many overwhelming terrors. I tenderly love these friends. I have, unknown to them, been for many months in their habits of daily kindness towards them, but they believe that I wish to injure them, and it is that prejudice which I wish to overcome. Where do these friends reside? Near this spot. The old man paused and then continued. If you will unreservedly confide to me the particulars of your tale, I perhaps may be of use in undeceiving them. I am blind and cannot judge you of your countenance, that you are sincere. I am poor and in exile, but it will afford me true pleasure to be in any way serviceable to a human creature. Excellent man, I thank you, and accept your generous offer. You raised me from the dust by this kindness, and I trust that, by your aid, I shall not be driven from the society and sympathy of your fellow creatures. Heaven forbid, even if you are really criminal, for that can only drive you to desperation, not instigate your virtue. I am also unfortunate. I and my family have been condemned, although innocent. Judge, therefore, if I do not feel for your misfortunes. How can I thank you, my best and only benefactor? From your lips first have I heard the voice of kindness directed towards me. I shall forever be grateful. And your present humanity assures me of success with those friends of whom I am on the point of meeting. May I know the names and residence of those friends? I paused. This, I thought, was the moment of decision, which was to rob me of, or bestow happiness on, me forever. Excuse me. I struggled vainly for firmness sufficient to answer him, but the effort destroyed all of my remaining strength. I sank on the chair and sobbed aloud. At this moment I heard steps of my younger protectors. I had not a moment to lose, but seizing the hand of the old man, I cried, "Now is the time. Save and protect me. You and your family are the friends of whom I seek. Do not you desert me in my hour of trial." "Great God!" exclaimed the old man. "Who are you?" At the instant the cottage door was open, and Felix, Sapphy, and Agatha entered. Who can describe their horror and consternation on beholding me? Agatha fainted, and Sapphy, unable to attend to her friend, rushed out of the cottage. Felix darted forward, and with supernatural force tore me from his father, to whose knees I clung. In a transport of fury, he dashed me to the ground and struck me violently with a stick. I could have torn him limb from limb, as the lion rends the antelope. But my heart sunk within me with bitter sickness, and I refrained. I saw him on the point of repeating his blow, when, overcome by the pain and anguish, I quitted the cottage, and in general tumult escaped unperceived to my hovel. Chapter 16. Cursed Creator. Why did I live? Why, in that instant, did I not extinguish the spark of existence which you had so wantonly bestowed? I know not. Despair had not yet taken possession of me. My feelings were those of rage and revenge. I could with pleasure have destroyed the cottage and its inhabitants, and have gutted myself with their shrieks of misery. When night came, I quitted my retreat, and wandered the woods, and now, no longer restrained by the fear of discovery, I gave vent to my anguish in fearful howlings. I was like a wild beast that had broken the toils, destroying the objects that had obstructed me, and ranging through the woods with a stag-like swiftness. Oh, what a miserable night I passed! The cold stars shone in mockery, and the bare trees waved their branches above me. Now and then the sweet voices of birds burst forth amidst the universal stillness. All, save I, were at rest or in enjoyment. I, like the arch-fiend, bore a hell within me, and finding myself unsympathized with, wished to tear up the trees, spread havoc and destruction around me, then to have sat down and enjoyed the ruin. But this was a luxurious sensation that I could not endure. I became enfeebled with excess of bodily exertion, and sank onto the damp grass in the sick impotence of despair. There was none among the myriads of men that existed who would pity or assist me. And should I feel kindness towards my enemies? No. From the moment I declared everlasting war against the species, and, more than all, against him who had formed me, and sent me forth to this insupportable misery. The sun rose, and I heard the voices of men, and knew that it was impossible to return to my retreat during the day. I accordingly hid myself in some thick underwood, determining to devote the ensuing hours to reflect on my situation. The pleasant sunshine and the pure air of day restored me to some degree of tranquillity, and when I had considered what had passed at the cottage, I could not help believing that I had been too hasty in my conclusions. I had certainly acted imprudently. It was apparent that my conversation had interested the father in my behalf, and I was a fool for having exposed my person to the horror of his children. I ought to have familiarized the old DeLacy to me, and by degrees to have discovered myself to the rest of the family, when they should have been prepared for my approach. But I did not believe my errors to be irretrievable, and after much consideration, I resolved to return to the cottage, seek the old man, and by my representations win him to my party. These thoughts calmed me. In the afternoon, I sank into a profound sleep, but the fever in my blood did not allow me to be visited by peaceful dreams. The horrible scene of the preceding day was forever acting before my eyes. The females were flying, and the enraged Felix tearing from his father's feet. I awoke exhausted, and finding that it was already night, I crept forth from my hiding place and went in search of food. When my hunger was appeased, I directed my steps towards the well-known path that conducted to the cottage. All there was at peace. I crept into my hovel and remained in silent expectation of the accustomed hour when the family arose. The hour passed, and the sun mounted high in the heavens, but the cottagers did not appear. I trembled violently, apprehended by some dreadful misfortune. The inside of the cottage was dark, and I heard no motion. I cannot describe the agony of this suspense. Presently 2 countrymen passed by, but, pausing near the cottage, they entered into conversation using violent gesticulations, but I did not understand what they said, as they spoke the language of their country, which differed from that of my protectors. Soon after, however, Felix approached with another man. I was surprised, as I knew that he had not quitted the cottage this morning, and waited anxiously to discover from his discourse the meaning of these unusual appearances. "Do you consider," said his companion to him, "that you will be obliged to pay 3 months' rent, and to lose the produce of your garden? I do not wish to take any unfair advantage, and I beg therefore that you will take some days to consider your determination. "It is utterly useless," replied Felix. "We can never again inhabit your cottage. The life of my father is in the greatest danger, owing to the dreadful circumstances that I have related. My wife and my sister will never recover from their horror. I entreat you not to reason with me any more. Take possession of your tenement, and let me fly from this place." Felix trembled violently as he said this. He and his companions entered the cottage, in which they remained for a few minutes, then departed. I never saw any family of the DeLacy any more. I continued for the remainder of the day in my hovel in a state of utter and stupid despair. My protectors had departed, and had broken the only link that held me to this world. For the first time the feelings of revenge and hatred filled my bosom, and I did not strive to control them, but allowed myself to be borne away by the stream. I bent my mind towards injury and death. When I thought of my friends, of the mild voice of DeLacy, the gentle eyes of Agatha, and the exquisite beauty of the Arabian, these thoughts vanished, and a gush of tears somewhat soothed me. But again, when I reflected that they had spurned and deserted me, anger returned, a rage of anger, and unable to injure anything human, I turned my fury towards inanimate objects. As night advanced, I placed a variety of combustibles around the cottage, and after having destroyed every vestige of cultivation in the garden, I waited with forced impatience until the mood had sunk to commence my operations. As the night advanced, a fierce wind rose from the woods, and quickly dispersed the clouds that had loitered in the heavens. A blast tore along like a mighty avalanche, and produced a kind of insanity into my spirit that had burst all bounds of reason and reflection. I lighted the dry branch of a tree, and danced with fury around the devoted cottage, my eyes still fixed on the western horizon, the edge of which the moon nearly touched. A part of its orbs was at length hid, and I waved my branch. It sunk, and, with a loud scream, I fired the straw, the heath, the bushes, which I had collected. The wind fanned the fire, and the cottage was quickly enveloped by the flames, which clung to it and licked at it with their forked and destroying tongues. As soon as I was convinced that no assistance could save any part of the habitation, I quitted the scene and sought for refuge in the woods. And now, with the world before me, whither should I bend my steps? I resolved to fly far from the scene of my misfortune, but to me, hated and despised, every country must be equally horrible. At length the thought of you crossed my mind. I learned from your papers that you were my father, my creator, and to whom I could apply with more fitness than to him who had given me life. Among the lessons that Felix had bestowed upon Safie, geography had not been omitted. I had learned from these the relative situations of the different countries of the earth. You had mentioned Geneva as the name of your native town, and towards this place I resolved to proceed. But how was I to direct myself? I knew that I must travel in a southwesterly direction to reach my destination, but the sun was my only guide. I did not know the names of the towns that I was to pass through, nor could I ask information from a single human being. That I did not despair. From you only I could hope for a succor. Although towards you I felt no resentment, but that of hatred. Unfeeling, heartless creator, who had endowed me with perceptions and passions, and then cast me abroad an object for the scorn and horror of mankind. But on you only I had any claim for pity and redress, and from you I determined to seek that justice which I had vainly attempted to gain from any other being which wore the human form. My travels were long, and the sufferings I endured intense. It was late in autumn when I quitted the district from which I had so long resided. I traveled only at night, fearful of encountering the visage of a human being. Nature decayed around me, and the sun became heatless. Rain and snow poured around me. Mighty rivers were frozen. The surface of the earth was hard and chill and bare, and I found no shelter. O earth, how often did I imprecate curses on this cause of my being? The mildness of my nature had fled, and all within me was turned to gall and bitterness. The nearer I approached your habitation, the more deeply did I feel the spirit of revenge enkindled in my heart. Snow fell, and the waters were hardened, but I resisted not. A few incidents now and then directed me, and I possessed a map of the country, but I often wandered wide from my path. The agony of my feelings allowed me no respite. No incident occurred from which my rage and misery could not extract its food. But a circumstance that happened when I arrived on the confines of Switzerland, when the sun had recovered its warmth, and the earth again began to look green, confirmed in its special manner the bitterness and horror of my feelings. I generally rested during the day, and traveled only when I was secure by night from the view of man. One morning, however, finding that my path lay through a deep wood, I ventured to continue my journey after the sun had risen. The day, which was one of the first of spring, cheered me by the loveliness of sunshine and the balminess of the air. I felt emotions of gentleness and pleasure that had long appeared dead revived within me. Half surprised by the novelty of these sensations, I allowed myself to be borne away by them, and forgetting my solitude and deformity, dared to be happy. Soft tears again bedewed my cheeks, and I even raised my humid eyes with thankfulness towards the blessed sun which bestowed such joy upon me. I continued to wind among the paths of the wood until I came to its boundary, which was skirted by a deep and rapid river, into which many of the trees bent their branches, now budding with fresh spring. Here I paused, not exactly knowing what path to pursue, when I heard the sounds of voices that induced me to conceal myself under the shade of a cypress. I was scarcely hid when a young girl came running towards the spot where I was concealed, laughing, as if she ran from someone in sport. She continued her course along the precipitous side of the river, when suddenly her foot slipped, and she fell into the rapid stream. I rushed from my hiding place, and with extreme labor from the force of the current, saved her and dragged her to shore. She was senseless, and I endeavored by every means in my power to restore her animation, when I was suddenly interrupted by the approach of a rustic, who was probably the person from whom she had playfully fled. On seeing me, he darted towards me, and tearing the girl from my arms, hastened toward the deeper part of the woods. I followed speedily. I hardly knew why, but when the man saw me draw near, he aimed a gun, which he carried, at my body and fired. I sunk to the ground. My injurer, with increased swiftness, escaped to the wood. This was then the reward of my benevolence. I had saved a human being from destruction, and as a recompense, I was now writhing under the miserable pain of a wound which shattered the flesh and bone. This feeling of kindness and gentleness which I had entertained but a few minutes before gave place to a hellish rage and gnashing of teeth. Inflamed by pain, I involved eternal hatred and vengeance to all mankind. But the agony of my wound overcame me. My pulse paused, and I fainted. For some weeks I led a miserable life in the woods, endeavoring to cure the wound which I had received. The ball had entered my shoulder, and I knew not whether it had remained there or passed through. At any rate, I had no means of extracting it. My sufferings were augmented by the oppressive senses of the injustice and ingratitude of their infliction. My daily vows rose for vengeance, a deep and deadly revenge, such as I would alone compensate for the outrages and anguish I had endured. After some weeks my wound healed, and I continued my journey. The labor I endured no longer to be alleviated by the bright sun or gentle breezes of spring. All joy were but a mockery, which insulted my desolate state, and made me feel more painfully that I was not made for the enjoyment of pleasure. But my toils now drew near a close, and in 2 months from this time I had reached the environs of Geneva. It was an evening when I arrived, and I retired to a hiding place among the fields that surrounded it, to meditate in what manner should I apply to you. I was oppressed by fatigue and hunger, and far too unhappy to enjoy the gentle breezes of evening, or the prospects of the sunset behind the stupendous mountains of Jura. At this time a slight sleep relieved me from the pain of reflection, which was disturbed by the approach of a beautiful child, who came running into the recesses I had chosen, with all the sportiveness of infancy. Suddenly, as I gazed upon him, an idea seized me. This little creature was unprejudiced, and I had lived too short a time to have imbibed the horror of deformity. If, therefore, I could seize him and educate him as my companion and friend, I should not be so desolate in this peopled earth. Urged by this impulse, I seized on the boy as he passed and drew him towards me. As soon as he beheld my form, he placed his hands before his eyes and uttered a shrill scream. I drew his hands forcibly from his face and said, "Child, what is the meaning of this? I do not intend to hurt you. Listen to me." He struggled violently. "Let me go," he cried. "Monster, ugly wretch, you wish to eat me or tear me from pieces. You are an ogre. Let me go, or I'll tell my papa." "Boy, you will never see your father again. You must come with me." "Hideous monster, let me go. My papa is a syndic. He is M. Frankenstein, and he will punish you. You dare not keep me." "Frankenstein, you belong then to my enemy, to him towards whom you have sworn eternal vengeance. You shall be my first victim." The child still struggled, and loaded me with epithets which carried despair to my heart. I grasped his throat to silence him, and in a moment he lay dead at my feet. I gazed on him, my victim, and my heart swelled with exultation and a hellish triumph. I clapped my hands. I exclaimed, "I too can create desolation. My enemy is not invulnerable. This death will carry despair to him, and 1,000 other ministries I shall torment and destroy him." As I fixed my eyes on the child, I saw something glittering on his breast. I took it. It was a portrait of a most lovely woman. In spite of my malignity, it softened and attracted me. For a few moments I gazed with delight on her dark eyes, fringed by deep lashes, and her lovely lips, but presently my rage returned. I remembered that I was forever deprived of the delights that such beautiful creatures could bestow, and that she whose resemblance I contemplated would, in regard to me, have changed that air of divine benignity to one expressive of disgust and affright. Can you wonder that such thoughts transported me with rage? I only wondered at that moment, instead of venting my sensations in exclamations of agony, that I not rush among mankind and perish in the attempt to destroy them. While I was overcome by these feelings, I left the spot where I had committed the murder, and seeking a more secluded hiding place, I entered a barn which appeared to me to be empty. A woman was sleeping on some straw. She was young, not indeed so beautiful as whose portrait I held, but of an agreeable aspect, and blooming in the loveliness of youth and health. Here, I thought, is one of those who joy imparting smiles are bestowed on all but me. And then I bent over her and whispered, Awake, fairest, thy lover is near. He who would give his life but to obtain one look of affections from thine eye, my beloved, awake. The sleeper stirred, a thrill of terror ran through me. She indeed awake and see me, and curse me, and denounce the murder. Thus she would assuredly act, if her darkened eyes opened and she beheld me. The thought was madness. It stirred the fiend within me. Not I, but she shall suffer. The murder I have committed because I am forever robbed of all that she could give me. She shall atone. The crime had its source in her. Be hers the punishment. Thanks to the lesson of Felix and the sanguinarity laws of man, I learned now to work mischief. I bent over her and placed the portrait securely in one of the folds of her dress. She moved again and I fled. For some days I haunted the spot where these scenes had taken place, sometimes wishing to see you, sometimes resolved to quit the world and its miseries forever. At length I wandered toward these mountains, and have ranged through their immense recesses, consumed by a burning passion which you alone can gratify. We may not part until you have promised to comply with my requisition. I am alone and miserable. A man will not associate with me, but one as deformed and horrible as myself would not deny herself to me. My companion must be of the same species and have the same defects. This being you must create. Oh, that was so good. That was so good. Okay, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it here for today. It's been 2 hours. I'm getting tired, and I think we made great headway. We are now like 2/3 of the way to the book. We're 2/3 of the way. Yeah, but we're getting to all the good parts. So, yeah, next week we will probably be able to finish this. We only have a few more. We're at chapter 15, 16, 17. We're on chapter 17. So that means we'll be done soon, like 10 more chapters. Yay! Okay, you guys, thank you all for coming today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing me your support, and I'm so happy that you guys could be here today. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I hope you enjoy it. Hi, Tara. Thanks. Hi. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you, Jack. Thank you for being here. Yes, this is a classic. Next week, I'm going to try to finish it. We have maybe 10 more chapters left. So yeah. Yeah. So I'm gonna call it for today. You guys have a wonderful day. Hug your friends. Tell someone you love them. Have a wonderful, great day, and I will see you guys next time. All right. Take care of yourselves. Okay. Mwah, 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 mwah. Bye.